All right, thank you.
Welcome.
This is the Board Natural and Cultural Resources Committee meeting for the East Bay Regional Park District for February 23rd, 2022, beginning at 12:31. Tammy, would you please take the roll?
Yes. Committee Chair Lane,
Here.
Director Coffey,
Here.
Director Corbett,
Here.
Assistant General Manager Kelchner.
Here.
And then today we will have staff presenting from Cultural Services Coordinator Anna Maria Guerrero, Fisheries Program Manager Joe Sullivan, Archives Program Supervisor Brenda Montano. Also joining us today, we have.
I'm not sure we need to list everybody who's joining
Okay.
today. And so I'll just say welcome to all of you. And say that today's meeting is held pursuant to the Brown Act as amended by AB 361. Board members and staff are participating via phone and video conferencing. And we are also providing live audio and video streaming and have provided the public with the opportunity to email or call in prior to the meeting for public comment. All information regarding participation in this meeting can be found on the agenda on the district website at ebparks.org. And after each presentation, we'll be taking public comment. So the committee members have any questions about the procedures for the meeting? Okay, then we'll begin with our agenda. And our first item is Native American Tribal Consultations and Best Practices. And Cultural Services Coordinator Anna Marie Guerrero is going to present that. So Anna Marie, welcome.
Let me unmute myself there. All right, hello. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. Great. And I'm going to go ahead and start here. Sorry, it always just takes a moment to get situated here. All right. So, good afternoon to the board and to everyone listening. My name is Anna Marie Leon Guerrero, and I am the Cultural Services Coordinator for the Park District. Today, I'll be presenting on Native American Tribal Consultation Best Practices at the Park District. First, I want to acknowledge that I am presenting today from San Leandro, which is located within the Halkeen and Huichun territory of the Chochenyo-speaking peoples who have continuously lived upon this land since time immemorial. The land now encompassed within the boundaries of the East Bay Regional Park District are the ancestral territory of the Ohlone, Bay Miwok, and Delta Yokut. Today's Ohlone, Bay Miwok, and Delta Yokut people are thriving, vital members of the greater Bay Area community. They remain intrinsically connected to the land they have stewarded since time immemorial. So I want to recognize and honor this land and their ancestors, elders, descendants, and all other members of their communities. The map on this slide is adapted from the Native Peoples of the East Bay brochure that was published by the Park District in 2018. This map illustrates the reconstruction of Ohlone, Bay Miwok, and Delta Yokut places, along with Park District lands in Alameda and Contra Costa counties. This map is a very useful illustration of the region's primary occupants, but it does not illustrate other tribes who may have also used these areas and held sacred spaces here, or who may have historical connections to this land. So the question is, how does the Park District interact with all of these tribes and or tribal individuals who may be traditionally and culturally affiliated with Park District lands. The Park District's 2013 master plan provides 2 policies on how and when the Park District interacts with Native American tribes that are culturally affiliated with Park District lands. CRM 5 indicates that the Park District will notify Native Americans in a timely manner of plans which may affect sites and landscapes significant to their culture. And CRM 6 states that the Park District will accommodate requests by Native Americans to help maintain and use their cultural sites within the Park District and to play an active role in the preservation and interpretation of these places. So, as a lead local agency, the Park District has regulatory responsibilities under the California Environmental Quality Act, specifically due to the introduction of Assembly Bill 52 on July 1st, 2015. So my role at the Park District is to focus on our cultural resources regulatory compliance, which includes AB 52, and to make sure that we are, to the letter and the spirit of the law, fulfilling our regulatory responsibilities. So although we do have district policies that indicate that we will notify tribes of projects that may affect their cultural heritage, AB 52 is where the legislative requirements come in and provide guidance, such as timelines on how and when to engage in consultation. AB 52 established a new category of resources in CEQA called tribal cultural resources. This inclusion requires agencies to consider tribal cultural values in addition to scientific and archaeological values when determining significance, impacts, and mitigation. The inclusion of AB 52 provides recognition that California Native American tribes have expertise with regard to their tribal history and practices, and that such knowledge should be included in environmental documents for projects that may have significant impacts on such resources. AB 52 requires a lead agency begin consultation with a California Native American tribe that is traditionally and culturally affiliated with the geographic area of the proposed project. And if the tribe requested to the lead agency in writing to be informed of proposed projects in that geographic area, once the agency has notified the tribe of such a project, the tribe has 30 days to request AB 52 consultation. Consultation is concluded when parties reach mutual agreement concerning appropriate measures for preservation or mitigation, or when either party acting in a good faith or after reasonable effort concludes that mutual agreement cannot be reached concerning appropriate mitigation measures for preservation or mitigation. So even if there are no agreed upon mitigation measures, AB 52 indicates that the lead agency shall still consider feasible mitigation measures. And before I really delve into consultation practices, I want to preface this by saying that a lot of what I'm going to say here is based on AB 52 training and information provided by the Native American Heritage Commission and is available online. Consultation is a meaningful process of seeking, discussing, and considering carefully the views of others. It should be conducted in a way that is mutually respectful of each party's sovereignty and recognizes the tribe's potential need for confidentiality with respect to places that have traditional tribal cultural significance. Although the goal of consultation should be to achieve resolution, if that is not possible, consultation should also document why it was not possible and what efforts were made. Successful consultation is based on research. So this means conducting the Sacred Lands Inventory search with the Native American Heritage Commission, conducting a record search with the California Historical Resources Information Center, or the CRIS. And at the Park District, we maintain a strong partnership with our local CRIS center, the Northwest Information Center. So we recently entered into a paid subscription service with them to maintain better knowledge of and control over resources in currently owned and operated Park District lands. Ethnographic studies, previous geotechnical studies, and any environmental studies that have been done for the project are all important items to review. And perhaps most importantly, regular conversations with tribes are also integral to this process. Before beginning consultation, it's important to note that these conversations may include the discussion of confidential sacred site locations, burial locations, and tribal practices. All of these may touch on spiritual matters, and we want to think about how we would want our own beliefs and practices respected. Consultation isn't to persuade a tribe into accepting preconceived plans, but to involve them in the planning process. Tribal consultation is not an accommodation for a tribe, it is the law under CEQA. AB 52 requires that any information, not just documents, submitted by a tribe during the environmental review process, not be included in the environmental review document or otherwise disclosed. And this is consistent with Government Code sections 525R and 5254.10. So unless the tribe agrees in writing, the project applicant or the applicant's legal advisors, using a reasonable degree of care, shall maintain the confidentiality of this information exchange for the purposes of preventing looting, vandalism, or damage to a tribal cultural resource, and shall not disclose the information to a third party. The CEQA guidelines also state that no document prepared for public examination shall include information about the location of sacred sites. Tribal consultation anywhere, although perhaps especially here in the East Bay, is complex and nuanced due to a number of complicated historical and socio-political and economic factors, which is why it really is best handled by one person who ideally understands the AB 52 process, as well as tribal histories and relations. So earlier I showed this slide depicting Ohlone, Bay Miwok, and Delta Yoko places in Alameda and Contra Costa counties. It really is a useful map which illustrates the tribal landscape as recreated by non-native anthropologists and ethnographers. It's a tool to get a glimpse into what the tribal landscape may have looked like. But at the same time, this map is unable to illustrate the complexities of tribal relationships across California and through time, which does influence who we consult with. To illustrate this, here is the California Native American Tribal Contacts List I obtained from the Native American Heritage Commission as part of a recent initial study, mitigated negative declaration study prepared for the Park District. So this list shows the tribes culturally and traditionally affiliated with Alameda and Contra Costa counties, for a total of 14 tribes that are associated with Park District lands. So in addition to Ohlone, Costanoan, Bay Miwok, Northern Valley Yoko, the list also includes other tribal affiliations such as Pomo and Miwok. And as I mentioned before, these were not primary residents of this area, but still have important places in the East Bay. And it's also worth noting that the Park District consults with 3 other individuals or tribal organizations that have self-identified to the Park District as being affiliated with our lands as well. So that brings our total up to 17. In addition to the tribal consultation that we are responsible for under CEQA, the Park District also assists lead federal agencies with tribal consultation as a result of our applications for federal funds or permits. Although it is the lead agency's responsibility to conduct consultation, we assist in the process to facilitate because the project or funding is of a benefit to the Park District and because we want to facilitate strong relationships with the tribes and federal agencies. So although the process is a little bit different, the principles for good consultation practices remain the same. So in closing, I just want to remind everyone that the location and information around archaeological and tribal cultural resources is restricted by federal and state law. And they're also protected by Park District policy. And if anyone is interested in more information about tribal consultation, I've listed some resources here. And with that, I want to thank everybody for their time.
Thank you so much, Anna Marie. And I think that we have lost Chair Lane. She may have lost connection, so it looks like she may be calling in, but until we securely have her back, I wonder if I could call on one of the other board members to see if the board members have any questions or comments for on the presentation.
Ellen, you want to go?
I would just say I'm quite impressed
by your attention to this this law, and it's so important to share this at a public meeting so people understand. There's so many things we do here at the Park District, you know. We have people who care about riding their bikes and the horses, you know, but we also have other things like protecting the environment, and then also protecting this very important history and the communities that have, you know, lived and shared their history and their life with us for so many years. And you need to let people know that's something else as a park district we really care about protecting, you know, this history. And so I'm new to this committee, so I don't know if you've talked about these issues before here, but this is just quite impressive and should be shared. And even more public meetings that we're involved in. So people understand we do all kinds of things here at the Park District, and we want to protect, you know, everybody's interests, knowledge, history, and it's very impressive to look at our protected the native communities' work and history. Thank you. It's great, and I would love to have a printed copy of the presentation.
Yes, we can arrange that. Yes.
Yeah. How long have we been pushing so hard on these issues? Is this?
Since
kind of new? I'm new to the committee, so.
I've only been here for 10 months, so maybe I can defer to Christina.
I will ask you to remind me, Anna Marie, though, AB 52 has been around for several years now, correct?
Since 2015, yes.
15.
Right.
Okay. Okay. So relatively new, but we've been working on that side of things with the formal consultation process and building our own skill and knowledge with that since the law came into effect in 2015. But I would say, at least since my time here in 2014, it's something that we've been work that we've been trying to build at the Park District for quite a long time. And as Anna Marie mentioned, there were, you know, at least 17 different tribes and tribal representatives that, so sometimes just understanding who to talk to and can be a part of the big challenge. And so our focus has really been on establishing those relationships before a project comes up, so that we so they know us and we know them, and then when a project comes up, we have those, you know, relationships are already ongoing, so it's a very important part of the work that we do here at the Park District.
So I have a question. Oh, Ellen, you still going?
I was just gonna say it'd be great to talk about this more often.
Yes,
So,
thank you. And we're excited to have Anna Marie on board, who's helping us do that. But I really appreciate the comment, Director Corbett, that more sort of public discussion about this work is a good thing. Thank you.
Director Coffey, take the floor.
And Ellen, you'll notice that on the work plan that we're talking about a little later, there are several references to Native American studies and programs. And we have been, I think now for a couple of years, we being Bev and me, have been promoting that, trying to get it in there. I've always been interested in a comprehensive look at what we do in terms of interpretation and programming involving the Native American heritage beyond just the input we get on each individual park or programs. For instance, at Black Diamond, I'll hear about that on occasion. The committee will hear about that. We just heard about consultations, but just we pay so much attention to and programming on a district-wide basis to the Native American heritage that we have voiced an interest over the last couple of years in getting a feel for that. And I think that's what you see in this work plan, but we can elaborate that later. My question is, and I tried to follow this, but I'm not clear on the legislative trigger for the consultations. If it becomes part of the CEQA process, then at what point in our own project development do we initiate consultations? And second part of the question is, does it matter if there's a negative deck or not? If we have to at least contemplate CEQA implications and decide there aren't any, and maybe a negative declaration is triggered, do we in that circumstance do consultations, or is it only where we definitely have to do an environmental impact report? And that
Yes.
might be a question for the lawyer.
If we're doing an initial study mitigated negative declaration, then we do engage in AB 52 consultation. The only time we wouldn't if it is an addendum to an EIR. So, or if it was an EIR that we're implementing that was published and completed the CEQA process prior to 2015, or if it's a notice of exemption. So those are the times when AB 52 wouldn't necessarily apply. And we do have a couple of those projects going on right now, but out of a good practice, and because we are getting stronger tribal relationships, we are sending out some tribal notices just saying, hey, we completed CEQA for this, AB 52 is complete, but we're doing an addendum, so don't worry, everybody. This has been done as part of that tribal relationship process.
Yeah, and I suppose that this type of attention to the Native American heritage took place prior to 2015. I have some vague memory of that being part and parcel of all the plans that were brought to us when I was on the PAC.
Prior to this, CEQA required just notification to tribes, but not consultation. But it's been required as part of the federal permitting process. And that's been usually more the responsibility of the lead federal agency. But because it's, our land and, the tribes that we interact with on a regular basis, we often have facilitated that process and continue to.
And setting aside the regulatory triggers or legal triggers and whatnot, do we have just a general best practice or even a policy somewhere that says when we embark upon a program, for instance, or a strategic study of something that doesn't necessarily trigger project implications, regulatory implications, do we consult with or seek those kind of consultations in any event, even if CEQA isn't involved or a project isn't involved? I sense we do, and that our naturalists do when they undertake programming.
I think that we do have best practices. And again, I've only been here for 10 months.
Yeah,
so I can only speak to what, I've seen so far. But a lot of times the projects that we do undertake do end up being like a CEQA project or a federal project. So oftentimes those come together. And then there are times when we are using best practices to try our best to do proper notification.
I'm just seeking affirmation of something I already think exists. So that was unfair. That does it. Thank you for the presentation. It's good to know that's going on. Ellen?
So I just, based on what you just said, Director Coffey, made me think about something else. Obviously we have to do things when we're working on various projects or, building things, approving things. But do we have just some sort of history, park by park, of who has lived in these park areas, what has impacted Native Americans? Do we have a history for each park?
I don't know that in most cases, the ethnographic information is so limited that we wouldn't necessarily have a lot of direct records for each park. But what we do have ideas about are the area in general. So, and anthropologists and now even native scholars are starting to really look into like early records to really try to recreate what the tribal landscape looked like. But again, because the information is limited, we can't necessarily say, oh, these people or this person, like, you know, lived here at this park.
But I just wonder, in general, do we keep a history of every single park and what has happened there in the past? I don't know. Do we?
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing from Anna Marie, and I know that Bev Ortiz, Anna Marie's predecessor, worked on this quite a bit too, is that yes, we do, based on the best knowledge, the best data that exists. So we don't, the information isn't always perfect, but we do rely on the information that's available and do our very best to compile those histories for each of our parks.
Yeah, it's true. Obviously, in some of our parks, we have more history and we spend more time on these issues. But I don't know if we have some sort of program that we do that everywhere. And we probably should take that up at some point.
Yeah, we can look at that and give it a little more definitive about what exactly we do and if there's more that we could do.
Yeah, it'd be nice to know what we
Sure.
have from each park district.
Okay.
We're just exposed to it, Ellen. At times we know that it's heavy at Coyote Hills, right?
Right.
No question about it. I know, you see Kevin Damster, I know that Black Diamond is very much focused on the Native American heritage, and not just at that park, but within the zone of interpretation, for instance, that those naturalists address. You know, rich histories out at Morgan Territory, obviously, and Mountain Valley. So I think it's kind of park by park, maybe, but it is an interesting question, and I think the naturalists program could come together and give us an idea of what that is on some future agenda, since we're talking about future agendas.
That makes a lot of sense.
Is Bev maybe back? Any sign?
The word is that she lost power at her house, and so she was trying to call in from her cell phone. But what I'd like to suggest is if we could ask Tammy Fallon if there were any public comments on this. And then maybe after public comments, if the board is interested in taking a 5-minute break and seeing if we can get Beverly back on before we go into the next agenda item.
Okay, that's good. Any public comment?
We didn't receive any ahead of time. We do have one cell phone on our participant list. If the number ending in 441 would like to unmute if you have a public comment.
I take it it's not Bev.
No,
No,
she has a
it's
different
me.
number.
I'm in both.
Oh, okay, one of those.
And are we saying her power has gone out at her house?
Yes, and I think her number just popped up.
Oh, there we go.
Yes. Can anyone hear me?
Welcome back.
Thank you. The power is still off. So so sorry to have missed whatever has happened. And I'm not seeing anything on the screen, of course. So where are we in the meeting?
So we just concluded, Bev, the first agenda item on Native American tribal consultations. We concluded with board questions and comment and asked for public comment, and there was none. So we were just about to check on your status and see if you could get back in the meeting, and you have. So the next step would be to call for the second agenda item presentation on removing fish barriers in the East Bay.
All right. So I think since I'm electronically handicapped here, Colin, if you would go ahead and run the rest of the meeting, I would appreciate it. And I can listen in here, although I can't see anything on my screen. So would you mind doing that?
Okay, I could do that. And heads up, staff already sent me a copy of the script. So I want to thank them for being on top of that, and we can do that. Bev, I don't know exactly at what point your power cut off during Anna Maria's presentation, but did you have any notes or questions or comments on that presentation? Understanding that you may have missed the majority of it, I'm not sure.
Indeed, I missed all of it. Right after she mentioned the 2 items that were in the master plan. So I had some questions after the presentation, but I don't think that they would work right now. So I'll just have to talk with her privately about it. So please
Yeah,
proceed with the meeting.
And happily, you can go back and watch the video of it and
Yes.
and then follow up on that. And that's very convenient. Part of what we have available now these days in the Zoom world. Okay, our second agenda item is removing fish barriers in the East Bay, presented by Fisheries Program Manager Joe Sullivan. Joe, or
hello.
You're gonna go ahead. Thank you. We see your slides up.
Excellent. Well, thank you for the introduction, and pleasure to be here. And Director Lane, I'm sorry you're not going to be able to see it. I have a lot of good pictures you're going to miss, but we're recording, so hopefully you can take a look at it later.
Thank you.
So switching gears, I'm going to talk about someone else that's been utilizing the East Bay for millions of years. And we're going to talk about fish and removing barriers in East Bay streams. So, I mean, I'm sure you know this, it's elementary, but what is a barrier? It's a barrier essentially stops 2 populations from interacting and breeding. And they can be natural or they can be man-made. They could also be partial barriers where fish can utilize them or go up them and during certain flows, or they could be temporary, like a log jam in a small stream that builds up debris, but during large storms, they will get blown out. So they come in different forms. And the reason we want to remove them is because, like I said, we want those populations to interact, and that increases genetic diversity. And when you have a very diverse genetic population, it makes them less susceptible to disease and also parasites. So barriers can be large, such as this one, which is Hoover Dam in Colorado River, Mount Shasta Dam, and this is the Klamath River Dam. But they can also be small. And coming here to the East Bay, this is up in Upper San Leandro Creek and Huckleberry Preserve. This is, you can see a culvert there that's rusty and eroded. It became clogged and water just started pouring over downstream, but it was a complete barrier to fish at the time. This is in Wildcat Creek. These are the twin culverts in Alvarado Park. This is an example of a partial barrier. You can see during these low flows, fish cannot swim upstream of these culverts, but during the rains, when there is water coming through, fish can get through them. This is in Alameda Creek. Many of you are familiar with what we call the Bart Weir. It's a complete barrier to fish migration. You can see there's a concrete ramp that fish aren't able to navigate up even during high flows. So why do we care about these? It's because we have a native fish called the coastal rainbow trout in many of our streams in the East Bay. They have a widespread distribution throughout California and the Pacific coast. So because of that, they're a species of moderate concern in the state because they do exist quite widespread. But most importantly is this species has multiple life history strategies, and that is key to conservation of this fish. And one of those life history strategies is what you hear about is steelhead. Steelhead is the same species of trout. The only difference is they migrate out to the ocean where they can grow very large, like the one you see here, and they return to freshwater streams to spawn and start the cycle all over again. Steelhead are federally threatened species under the Endangered Species Act. What's important for this species, I gotta change my screen a little bit here. Because they have these two life histories, when conditions aren't favorable in freshwater streams, such as long periods of drought or the water is too warm, they have the ability to migrate out to the ocean for refuge. If the conditions are good in streams, it takes a lot of energy and effort to become a steelhead, and a long migration out to sea and a long migration back. They'd prefer to stay in a freshwater stream. But as we know in East Bay streams, during long periods of drought, those conditions aren't favorable for fish. Sometimes streams go completely dry. So without the ability for steelhead to migrate back into a freshwater stream to reproduce because of barriers, we could lose entire populations of rainbow trout in some of the East Bay streams. Do we have them in the East Bay? We sure do. This is a picture of a big storm in Alameda Creek. This is at the Bart Weir that I showed you a picture of. And it takes these large freshwater flushes to attract steelhead back into a system. And these are just some photos. Sorry, Director Lane. These are steelhead trying to navigate up that Bart Weir. I think it was back in 2019, these photos were taken. So they are out there in the ocean waiting for these big freshwater flushes, and they do want to come back up a North Stream, but they hit barriers where they're not allowed to get to suitable spawning habitat. I wanted to talk about Wildcat Creek in particular. These are examples of what we call partial barriers. Up on the top left is a fish ladder that was built by the Army Corps of Engineers in a flood control channel downstream in Richmond. Ironically, it can clog up with debris and sediment and become a permanent barrier. So we don't think of fish ladders being a barrier, but this one, the way it was designed, was not the proper design. And so when it does clog up, it does become a barrier. And that's the first one that steelhead or salmon would come to, coming up Wildcat Creek. And then the other photos are examples of box culverts through Richmond and San Pablo that are partial barriers. When they're flowing during certain flows, fish can navigate through. Obviously, when there's very little flow, they can't get past these barriers. But if they do, there is habitat upstream in Wildcat and Tilden Parks. They just need to be able to get there. And on the bottom right-hand picture, you can see there's those big freshwater flows that will attract migratory fish from the ocean. This is a picture in the Botanic Garden showing those big flows. So what do we do about these barriers? How do we get fish back into our systems? You take down the wall. You allow them that access. It's that simple. And we are doing it. This is a fish ladder that's near complete construction at the Bart Weir that I showed you pictures of fish trying to navigate up. This is the third fish ladder in Alameda Creek that will be complete. And once it's operating, fish will be able to, we will have migratory fish back in Alameda Creek, spawning in Sunol Park, and it's very exciting. And in our own parks, we are near, this is the final year of construction, the McCosker property. As you guys are well aware, this was the stream was completely culverted underground, and there's a large culvert that goes under Pinehurst Road that was a barrier for fish navigating up into this. So we've improved access at that culvert to allow fish into this stream and completely daylighted this stream, which will provide spawning habitat for rainbow trout. The Clogged Culvert I showed you before in Huckleberry, this is the downstream end of it. You're looking on the left, and it was a barrier because it was completely clogged with sediment for one, and there's also a drop at the bottom end of that culvert that fish couldn't navigate during low flow. So we removed that culvert and put in an arched culvert that you see on the right, and did some riparian restoration there with plantings. And now fish have access to near an extra mile of spawning and rearing habitat upstream of this culvert. This is a project we're working on now, working on the design. This is Brook Road Crossing, which is just downstream of Lake Anza. On the left, you can see it's a concrete crossing to get to a trail from the staging area. And in this picture, you can see how fish can't go upstream of this barrier. During higher flows, they can navigate it, so it is only a partial barrier. And on the right, these are the current plans. Can you guys see my mouse moving? Okay, good. So this is the staging area parking lot, and the stream runs right through here. So there's a small drainage that comes in. No, sorry about that. There's a small drainage that comes down parallel to the parking lot. So the idea is to build a bridge across that drainage and a larger bridge across Wildcat Creek to get access to the trails. And that barrier will be removed along with some stream restoration. But before they even can get to that Brook Road site, there's a complete barrier. And you guys are aware of the state of Jewel Lake. It was built 100 years ago, an earthen dam as a drinking water reservoir, no longer functions as one, but it has since filled with sediment. And we decided to conduct a feasibility study, which is complete. And you'll hear a lot more about this at the next board executive committee meeting, but we evaluated 4 design options. One was to take no action, to allow it to fill in and allow the stream to reroute itself over the spillway, and basically it would become a marsh. The second plan is to keep the lake, but install a fishway around the spillway area, which would allow fish migration during high flow periods. The third option is to remove the dam and Jewel Lake and restore the natural stream of Wildcat Creek. This would allow fish passage and sediment transport, which are the 2 main goals of the project. The fourth option is to maintain Jewel Lake, but create a bypass that goes around the lake to allow for fish passage during certain high flow periods. And it would also, during high flow, transport sediment downstream. We haven't made up our minds. It's up to the board to decide the best option, but you will be presented with this complete study very, very soon. But they're there. I don't know if I'm hoping you saw some of the buzz this past winter during the atmospheric rivers that we saw in the fall and early winter. We had a historic number of Chinook salmon show up in Alameda Creek, also in San Leandro Creek, San Lorenzo. They were finding them in Lake Merritt, and we also saw them in Wildcat Creek. We found carcasses of salmon, and it was in record numbers. And they were knocking at the door, trying to get upstream. And it's too bad the last fish ladder in Alameda Creek wasn't operating yet, because all of these fish would have been upstream in our parks, spawning, creating a brand new population of Chinook salmon. So my mantra is, all we have to do is build it, and they will come. They're out there. They're just waiting for their cue to enter into the East Bay streams, and we just need to provide them access. So I appreciate you listening. I just wanted to finish with a couple photos. Of the center one is we do, prior to the fish ladders being built, we rescue steelhead in Alameda Creek and move them upstream so they can continue their spawning migration. And that's a photo of one of them. Beautiful, beautiful male. And then this past December, I assisted state fisheries biologist collecting salmon carcasses that will give us information on where these fish came from. And I wanted to throw my daughter in there. She got to tag along, just as an example of why we want these fish to return and restoring these populations for future generations. So I really appreciate the time of presenting, and we'll take questions if you have any.
Sure. Thank you, Joe. Ellen?
I'm just going to say, yeah. Let's do this. I realize it takes a lot of work, and I remember from many, many years ago, long before I was on the board, the discussion about finding these fish along San Leandro Creek, since I've lived in San Leandro for a long time, and how impressed people were. But I guess one question I would have is, are there some laws or rules that create these, these blocking situations? Are those rules? Are they old laws from way back? I also remember from years ago being part of some work in San Leandro where we took down barriers along in San Leandro, not too far from the bay, but there had been a lot of blocking in that area. It's not part of our park district, but between Hayward and Oyster Bay, there was work that we did to take those barriers out. But are those just barriers that were there from a number of years ago? Are they barriers that are still there that we have to change some rules? How do we do this? It makes so much sense to make this a better life for these fish.
Yeah, there's not, Christina can correct me if I'm wrong, but there's no particular law that says we have to take down these barriers. And one of the problems is these streams span multiple agencies and stakeholders. So it's difficult to rally all the stakeholders to remove, like the fish ladder I showed down in Richmond, like the park district can't do anything about it. It's in a flood control channel, so it belongs to the county. And we can assist and give guidance and try to raise money. But there isn't a particular law. From my experience, it's voluntary on agencies to remove these barriers. But I do think the park district has a unique opportunity to be leaders in removing barriers to allow fish passage.
I know that the answer to this question is very long and we couldn't answer it right now, but it would be nice to have sort of a list of why these barriers exist in certain areas. If they continue to exist because of some law or rule, or it was just, again, something that was imposed many, many, many years ago and it's still sitting there, but it doesn't necessarily have to still be there. And obviously there's other issues, where you're near a BART station or some issue with a water district, and moving some of these things impact things they'd like to do. So anyway, I think it's a great effort for us to see first where there are places where we can remove these barriers to get these fish going and up into the park district where they should be able to live. But anyway, once again, I'm glad I'm on this committee for the first time. It's quite impressive, the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
This was the hardest thing for me because everyone of my colleagues wanted to be on this committee, and now you know why. I don't know why everyone doesn't want to be on finance like me. I mean, it just this stuff is just really fascinating stuff. Director Lane, you're there by phone. You want to unmute and have some comments or questions? Just giving Bev a moment, see.
Mhm. Just a request to staff if Director Elaine needs any help unmuting.
There
Great.
she is.
There she is.
Okay, there I am. My phone turned dark as well, but I was able to hear all of it, and I really appreciate the report and some of the optimism. I think the that flow of the water, certainly should have opened people's eyes to what the fish are trying to do. And I appreciate your mantra of, build it or remove it and they will come, because I think that's the case. We had, I'm part of a Friends of Salmon Creek group, which is quite a large creek, and Walnut Creek is part of its watershed. And there was a report that came out from County Flood Control that flat out said, well, there are no fish in the creek. So, and shortly after that, it had this huge rainstorm and there were fish banging against the drop structures, trying to move up Walnut Creek. So it's certainly a symbol of their persistence. And I'm happy to see us doing what we can to eliminate barriers appropriately. Of course, fish are not the only wildlife that we have to think about in this, but good job. So thank you for the report, Joe.
Yeah, no, thank you, Director Lane. Yeah, I think this what we saw this past winter is just a testament to how well adapted these migratory species are to climate change and long periods of drought. And then when conditions are right, they show up again. And that's what we saw with the Chinook salmon. It was just incredible. And I feel Steelhead are exactly the same way. And they're very adapted to this type of environment, and they've evolved millennia to these conditions.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Joe, I have a question that is flowing from the touristy approach I have to some of our parks and the trails and such, and that is, what is generally the season if I want to go and check out whether the salmon are running up creeks or the steelhead? Is it just the rainy season generally and wait until there's a heavy rain and maybe a couple days go out? What's the rule of thumb when we're not having programs that I've been on a program that took that took us on a hike along Marsh Creek trail when the salmon were running upstream. It was great, but I don't remember the time of year and whether there's a rule of thumb for when to go out and do that.
Yeah, there definitely is. The salmon we saw this past winter, they're a fall run Chinook salmon, and they start in early mid-fall if there's rain. So the timing of those storms we saw in October and November was perfect. That they were just sitting out in the ocean waiting for their cue, and the timing was just perfect for them. And so they run typically from September, October into about January. And then steelhead are a little bit later. Right now would be the time of year we would expect to see steelhead coming up into our streams. I was hoping we were going to get a couple good storms and we might see them, but without any real good storm to attract them, we won't see them. So steelhead come late January, and they usually spawn through March or April, and then they leave. So salmon come up once and spawn and die, and you'll find carcasses in the stream and along the banks. Steelhead are kind of like the ghosts of migratory fish. They come up, they spawn, and they head back out to the ocean because they can do that multiple times. So they're a little bit more late winter. Salmon are more early winter, late fall.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for highlighting the Jewel Lake issue for us. I think it's one of the reasons most of us don't like the idea of just doing nothing, is because there are options that would bring down the barrier, obviously, that the old reservoir has created and continues to create. So those options are certainly more popular with, I think, everybody, because of that facet of what they do in bringing down those barriers. A question on projects, and I appreciated your going through the projects, most of which I was familiar with: McCosker, Jewel Lake, and others. And I'm wondering about where these projects get pursued in-house by just stuff we do in-house, as opposed to putting out contracts and construction contracts. Obviously, a large project like McCosker is done over the course of a lot of planning and a lot of construction. But you put up a slide on a stream restoration at Brook Road crossing in Tilden, downstream from Lake Anza, and that's something that I haven't heard of before. So I'm suspecting maybe this is something that was in the regular course of capital project planning with the district, that is just there and doesn't get to the board of directors level, and maybe it's done in-house, or how has that happened?
Yeah, so mainly it's me being a pest saying we need to do something here. And then I will contact Lisa, who just came online, and ask design and construction to manage the project. And so they hire the consultants and they go through the design, and then they hire the construction folks. So I'll let Lisa kind of answer more on how that process works, but there is a process in-house that we go through.
Christina,
Lisa,
Lisa Gorgon, Chief of Design and Construction. Christina, do you want to, I have just maybe some clarification on that, Director Coffey.
I'll just give a general response, Lisa, and then you can add. In terms of how we decide to do these projects, Joe and the other stewardship staff have a very good sense about where the barriers are in our parks and what would be most helpful to species. And so they have a regular inventory of those. And then we combine that with, where there are opportunities for funding and where there might be multiple benefits. So we have some other resource improvements or recreation improvements. And we also, a couple of these, Huckleberry, I know for sure, serves as mitigation for other projects. So where we might be having, providing some public access somewhere else with some trails, Huckleberry provides mitigation that we get credit for, to offset that impact of the other project. So it's sort of a complex matrix of criteria. And of course through the budget process as well. But that's part of, I'm glad you raised the question, Director Coffey, because we are looking at our capital improvement program and how to have more formalized prioritization criteria that we can bring to the board, that the board can work with to really kind of improve our transparency and the board's ability to engage with all of those conversations about prioritization. So more to come on that for sure. And Lisa Gorgon, did you have a comment as well?
Yeah, thank you, Christina. As Joe mentioned, this was stewardship had identified for quite a while. My understanding is the condition of this Brooks Road barrier. And so I think funding, it was actually the board who adopted funding for it in the budget back in 2019. So this is an adopted project in your project, and it shows up in your budget book. So of course, when design and construction is working on more of a maintenance level, like a kind of, it's a little bit, they're not, it's not as a big effort, then we can provide design services right away. Like we get a call, we work through mast. If it's too big for mast, we'll work on it, or we'll help with design. With something like this, it's quite a large project. And so was a board approved project. So there was funding that was put in. The funding that was put in was to provide for, as Joe said, the engineering. So that initial pre-design, and that's where the project is right now. It's in pre-design. As Joe said, we're looking at some options, the best way to solve this complex project, because it is, as Christina said and Joe said, it's access, it's restoration, and then it's also, needs to be a good visitor experience. So there's kind of all these things in a dynamic condition where, water moves. So it's a little bit tricky. So we do, this is the restoration projects, a team. So the same team that's working on Jewel Lake is working on this project. Like I said, we don't have a preferred concept or a concept for this. So we would anticipate bringing forward that to the board once we have that, probably to board exec, because the next step would be to then move it forward to get an approved project description. So we would follow the same process that we follow with all of our projects, where we would bring it to board exec and then to the full board, but we're not quite there yet. I hope that is helpful.
Yeah, it did. I mean, I just wondered if it was, you folks internally fix up culverts all the time. And that's just something that happens. And I wondered at what stage does this become a larger project? So Brooks Road was one of these projects, and either I don't remember it, or if I had looked more carefully through the project book that we get of several hundred pages in 2019, I would have seen this as a scheduled and budgeted project. That's what you're telling me, and that's the answer.
Yeah, it's been there for a couple of years. It took us a while. Sometimes things get put in the budget before we're able to advance them. Some projects take longer, as Joe mentioned, McCosker. Because of that incredible storm event, which was great, it did create quite a bit of havoc to the project. And so we're facing significant delays on it because of that, although happy for the fish. So, and then just to your question about a lot of culvert replacements, we work very closely with mast and stewardship. So as projects, as culverts are needed to be repaired or things come up, we kind of look at them with mast, and if it's too big to be done in-house for mast to do those fix, then there's an evaluation period where we have a process where it's a design service request that comes to us so that we can track it, and we evaluate if it's big enough. Basically, if it's over 100,000, if it becomes capitalizable, then that's something that the design and construction. So that's really the number, the level of effort, complexity, and dollar. Then it comes up to design and construction.
Okay, I got it. Very thorough. And let's ask if there are any further. I see Director Corbett has another question or comment.
Yeah, I know you may have touched on this a little bit, but I guess one of the goals is removing these barriers and creating the situation where the fish are able to continue to grow and live further up some of the creeks and rivers and all that. That will create a situation where there's additional wildlife that is protected or improved as a result of that. Is that part of what we're looking at?
Certainly, yeah. In the case of Wildcat Creek, for example, all of the suitable spawning habitat for steelhead and salmon is in our parks. It extends from Alvarado all the way upstream to the Bot Garden. So they have to get access. They require very specific size gravel and water temperature to spawn, and that is it. All of it is on our property. And certainly, if salmon come into Wildcat Creek and die, that benefits otters and coyotes and any other predator that will feed on those carcasses. And it also provides those dying carcasses essentially are bringing nutrients from the ocean up into the parks, and those nutrients get distributed throughout the whole area through predation and just from decomposing. And those nutrients are very beneficial for wildlife and riparian areas. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And so obviously it looks like it's an important thing for us to do if we're concerned about taking care of the wildlife in our parks. I have another question. In the event, obviously it costs money to fix these things. Have we ever done any specific work towards advocacy or building legislation or digging to see if there's money already out there at the state and the federal level that could help us do some more of this work? Do we do specific advocacy? Do we look to carry a bill with one of our local legislators to improve the ability to do this work that you're doing?
Christina?
Sure. And I'm going to ask Chief of Stewardship, Matt Grau, if he has anything to add on this. I know that we have gotten quite a bit of state money and grant money to do this kind of work and restore riparian habitat. There are several programs out there. But Matt or Lisa, do you have anything to add?
I would say they're just very fundable. I mean, these fish restoration projects, there are a lot of money out there for removing barriers and doing the stream restoration. We were successful at McCosker in getting a lot of grants once we had a good design. I think the initial thing is getting a good design, or in some cases having a watershed analysis and a plan of understanding where various barriers are and linking our design to a larger plan. So sometimes if that plan doesn't exist, we might have to do a little bit of that context building. And many of our sections of stream, they're already very well studied. So we have a lot of that and know what the needs are. Just like Joe said, where we're all the spawning habitat in Wildcat Creek, it's been studied for years. So it's really a question of just creating more access in those areas. But once we do all that and those plans are in place, there's a lot of agencies out there that will provide funding for these types of projects.
So the funding does exist for the removing of those barriers. Yeah. If we put the projects together.
Yeah, and so, I mean, I know we're going to get really into the weeds here on this one, but just for example here, we talk about huckleberry, and we need to do that to mitigate for our routine maintenance impacts. So we have that routine maintenance permit, the big 5-year permits we all heard about for years, and we didn't have them in place. We've had them in place for about 4 years now. We've gotten a lot of work done, but as getting all that work done, we have to mitigate for that. So we chose on huckleberry to not get outside funding because it was a simple enough project we could do. We had an engineer design, and we could implement it with our own funds and then get mitigation credit for that. Whereas like Brook Road, we haven't gone that route with that one yet, and I don't know that we will. We may once we get the design and look for it. But it's very fundable, and if we don't need that mitigation and we can get other people to pay for it, then we should do that. So Brook Road is one we've kind of held off and saying we're going to use that for mitigation because it seems like it will be easily fundable by other resource agencies that are trying to fund these projects. So that's just one of those strategic things we're thinking about as we design these projects on where the best fit would be.
Okay, thanks.
And Lisa, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, thank you. Again, Lisa Gorgon, Chief of Design and Construction. Director Corbett, we do work really closely with legislative affairs and the grants team. We meet with them every other month, and we go through our work plan, where we are, and describe projects that we think we need legislative help for funding. So not necessarily to create legislation, although that sounds great, but definitely to give them a heads up so that we kind of have a pipeline. So we do, that is something that we're very mindful of, and we like to be very coordinated.
So those various barriers that you showed us photos of, are those all on the list of projects we're going to work towards removing those barriers, or?
I think many of the barriers that that Joe showed photos of, we don't own and we don't have control over. So that's the challenge for us. But certainly we do have identified in our parks places that projects that we can do and that we are working toward doing, is in the coming years to continue to try to remove those barriers. I also just wanted, if I could just respond to one other thing that you had said earlier, Director Corbett, you were asking about the infrastructure and whether there are laws that either require or make it harder to remove the infrastructure. Most of this is legacy infrastructure. And so there are dams and weirs and infrastructure that was constructed at a time that we, meaning kind of the general population, weren't really looking at fish passage and didn't understand, and so now it's a question of the money and the will and the coordination to remove those barriers or to provide a way around for the fish. New construction does have a lot more restriction. So if a new construction is going to be built, that the fish passage does need to be taken into account and designed for. So it's really the legacy infrastructure all over the East Bay that we're looking at. And one other thing I wanted to mention, which is that the Jewel Lake project is coming to the board executive committee. The plan right now is on March 11th. So that will be to the March board executive committee to provide more information about those 4 different options that we've studied.
Okay, we should get on to the next agenda item. We're a bit behind schedule. And I'll ask if there are, of our clerk, whether there were any public comment requests.
There were not.
All right. So moving on to the third agenda item is the 2022 Archives and History Center programming, a big picture overview. Brenda Montano. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Coffey, and welcome, Director Corbett, to the Natural and Cultural Resources Committee. Glad to have you. And hello, Director Lane. I am so sorry that you aren't able to join us with the presentation, but like Joe said, hopefully you'll be able to go back and see the recording. Both Joe's and Anna Marie's presentations remind me of how many things I love about the Park District and why I've been here for a long time. I was just thinking, I've been here 19 years this year, and started out as a clerical in public affairs, and never knew my dreams, and really enjoy my work. And I have my boss, Carol Johnson, to thank, the AGM of Public Affairs, and as well as the board for their continued support of the archives, and many other staff that have inspired me over the years. Again, my name is Brenda Montano. I'm the Archives Program Supervisor. For this job, I'm in my 14th month. And this year, I'm excited to say that I have a department code. So that is really exciting. So I'm getting going. So I'm going to start share my screen. And then let's see here. Okay. So I'm going to present on what we are hoping to accomplish for this year. And we've got a title for what we have here, which is the Archives and History Center. And really wanting to share not all the things we're hoping to do this year, but definitely focusing on one particular part of our goals. So I started in the Archives and History Center. Our priorities really surround these different topics. So one is historic records management. As you see here in these photos to the right of our volunteers, this is Ann Rockwell and Bill Vidor. A lot of the volunteer work is identifying, and then also some of our volunteers are involved in doing digital photography and or other digital access means. But it's so much more. It's cataloging. It's trying to decide what is can be accessible now and what can be accessible in the future, and of course the preservation of all of that. And then our oral history program, which is growing by leaps and bounds. This is a little clip here of our former board director, Whitney Dotson, at the Dotson Family Marsh. This was done in 2016, and I'm happy to say we finally have received a beautiful final copy of it from the Bancroft for our own use. And hopefully I'll be able to share that. Again, we're working hard on collecting stories and histories of our parks and our agency, and trying to collect those here in the archives, and then also assisting with the cultural resources management. And these are some of the photos recently of our field projects. And this is Burrell, what's going on in the house there, and some finds and what we go through sometimes, a few papers there. And then also, I think it's starting to come a time for me and looking at the center and looking at my job and trying to define what are we doing here, and how are we supporting the district, and trying to decide like how should our parameters be. And I had to kind of just evaluate, what have I been doing for the past 14 months? And of course, most of I've been helping with the archives much longer than that in my other roles in public affairs. And I did try to separate it out in these 4 categories, and one being the records management, and what we've been working on this year. And a lot of that goes towards with the needs assessment that we did in 2019 and 2020, and those recommendations for the archives. And then, of course, the oral history program, developing a master list, going out and doing video interviews and collecting those stories, putting together histories, assisting with INR and other departments on trying to collect stories and put them together, but then also working on outreach with UC Berkeley, and then also trying to still do my public affairs thing, which is try to get it out there to people and have people know about some of the stuff that we have. Cultural resources. Recently, I've done a lot of great partnerships with operations and planning on looking at some of the historic sites and some of the stuff that's out there that just needs to be either rehoused or taken care of. And we're really trying to follow best practices of inventorying and identifying items now. And then thinking about, what are some temporary or future needs of these items. And then I kind of put these bubbles around of vested partners, which is almost everybody at the Park District. And it reemphasizes that this is a district-wide program. This is a district-wide support for our historic records. And here's another bubble too for the volunteer program that's here at the park, at the archives, and our great group of volunteers, and some, as you know, are former employees at the Park District, retirees who have a wealth of knowledge and years of institutional knowledge, which is really helpful for going through a lot of these records here. And of course, our primary goal is, and I was trying to think what's their simplest way to explain this, is we're looking for having access to the archives and preserving what we have. And that's about as easy as I can explain it. And right now it's, I wanted to spend some time in this presentation on access and where we're at with public access, and not just public as in the general public, but also for our staff and supporting our departments. So right now we're almost at a point where we can say we are almost at full transfer of all of the records that are at Black Diamond Mines archives. This is a picture of the actual trailer there. It is one of the most robust collections in the Park District. And most of you know that it has undergone years of support by Tracy Parent, who was a former supervising naturalist, and also her group of volunteers and naturalists who have contributed to identifying the records that are there, organizing it and having a good collection. Well, they've put that all into a past perfect software database for many years. And the backup has been 2 hard drives and no other backup of these records. And in there would be a catalog, in there would be the identification of what they are. And then of course, some even records have images. It also has the most robust oral history collection. And this is where the oral histories were born for the district of collecting and putting together at Black Diamond Mines. So we have 2 I can't do this all by myself. In fact, I was kind of nervous about trying to translate what these 2 people do, which I have to acknowledge Crystal Jimenez, who has worked out at Black Diamond Mines for quite a few years, and Thomas Nelson, who is contracts with me here at the archives, but he has been here for about 6 years. We've contracted with him for 6 years now. And he was an intern. He started as an intern here at the Park District, graduated, and has started offering his services to me. And first was this very small capacity of just cleaning stuff up or organizing or putting things in. And through the years, he has gone through a series of educating workshops and classes. And all 3 of us, Crystal, Thomas, and I, are all graduates of the Western Archives Institute, which is a training program run by the Society of California Archivists. So we all 3 feel really fortunate to have gone through that institute. And I just really, I really appreciate these 2 folks and their energy and their knowledge of the technicalities of managing a database and identifying records. So right now, this is what Proficio looks like. When you look up a record, and this is a record that's in the Black Diamond Mines. Oh, I forgot to mention too, one of the benefits of everything being transferred into this new software, which is Proficio, is that it's all cloud-based. So our records are being backed up into the cloud. So I feel that is going to help the future and sustainability of these records being maintained and kept. So anyways, so this is what it looks like if you're an archivist and you're going to look up in the Proficio module of our archives. And we actually, we have tried to work on how would it look like if we were to look up like a photograph, or how would it look with a photograph? And this is the Martin J. Cooney collection, or part of it. And really great photos. There's lots of stories that could be told out of each photograph that he's taken. So this is currently what we could possibly, provide for the staff to look at, but still it's technical. It would be a lot of training, and especially if we were to try to have it be something that, the staff could research, or for public. So this is where we go into our next ideal, which is how do we try to display our archives in a way that's easier to look at and to research, and also to have some kind of appeal to a researcher or to even somebody who's just curious about a history of the parks or what materials we have. So Proficio does have that particular web portal and available, and these are two examples of what they can do. The National Park Service is part of what when we first started with Proficio as being our digital access management system. It was to model after what the National Park Service was using. So they do contract, they have their own system with Proficio. And this is part of what they've done with the web portal of that. But there are others out there. There's others that could be compatible with the databases that we are creating right now. And that's going to be part of what our work here at the archives is going to be, is looking at this year. What other avenues could we go in? These Preservica and Archive Space are both programs or systems that the needs assessment, the recommendations had asked to say these are also items. Archive Space is free, but it may have some limitations. Preservica is also a type of way that we could pursue that costs money. So we've got 3 different web portals this year to kind of go through and decide what we're going to do. But we do have some existing web access for people who might want to research about the park district. It's very limited right now, but it's something. And especially with the Online Archive of California, we're very excited to have that agreement now with them, a contract agreement. It's not anything that is monetary. It's all a free service, but it's a way that we could put our records on for a well, this is statewide, but it's also national wide access for people to research documents here. We do have 2 collections, the founding and legacy documents, and the Judy Irving film collection. So Judy Irving was from the Bob Walker days, and she was friends with him. But she's a filmmaker in her own right, actually Academy Award winning filmmaker, documentarian here in the East Bay. And during her time in the 90s, late 80s, early 90s, she was filming a lot of the Bay Area in partnership with the Park District and filming our parks and some of our naturalists too. So she made a series of movies. Those movies were put on like PBS and different channels like that. And she had her collection at the Oakland Museum, and they transferred that over to here at the Park District a couple years ago. And we received a grant by California Revealed to digitize her films. They digitized everything for us and also posted them on their website in partnership with the Online Archive of California as well. So it's exciting. It was a way for us to attempt this type of partnership. And then, of course, Internet Archive, which we have all of our master plans and board material from years past in there. All of these I do help maintain, or we write the descriptions, and we do need to keep up on these. So then there is this storytelling, which is broad. It's incredible. When Director Corbett, when you mentioned about having a history of each park for for us, it's daunting in a way, but it's also exciting, and it's also great for us, for our own resources. But it's also a way for the public to know that we appreciate the cultural stories of people, our land, the cultural histories of our landscapes, and also the legacy of our own district, and the efforts that staff has done over the years to create a park district that they're proud of. We're almost done with the master list for the oral history program, the oral histories, and that's a database that at least we can search, those of us who are in the archives, so that we can locate and understand what the status is of all of our oral histories. And then that's where we want to explore this year, is how can we put these oral histories that we have, and here's an example of 2 of them. These were done in the last couple of years, although the dates are misleading. That's when these interviews were done. But these 2 oral histories are incredibly amazing. They're thick, and they have a rich history, basically, of East Contra Costa County. This is an example from National Park Service about how they share their stories. Wouldn't it be exciting if we had something on our website? And the reason why I have a rabbit in the rabbit hole is it's a very fun thing we say in the archives, and I have with my volunteers, when you all of a sudden, 2 hours later, you find you've been down this rabbit hole, but a fascinating rabbit hole of history or stories that have been told that are very compelling and intriguing. And here's another avenue that we have already existing, our partnership with the Bancroft Library and our ongoing contract. We have a number of oral histories there that people can research and look at. And also it's a great, it's starting to grow. So we're still working on trying to get all of the oral histories that have been interviewed on there into the database, but there are quite a few already. And this is our website right now. This page is a blank slate, really. The Archives and History program, where it goes is still yet to be determined. We don't have too much on this page yet, but it is definitely a place where maybe perhaps some of this discovery could happen. So I put this as kind of an example of what could be on our website for people to click and explore, and what I'd like to see, a way for people to look at historic photographs and learn about those, watch our historic vignettes about locations and places, look at rare footage that I just received, just digitized, a 16 millimeter film. And I talked about the Internet Archive and the Online Archives of California. And I understand that there's a term for them, and they're called resource partnerships. And those are kind of the big ones. But wouldn't it be neat to actually have partnerships with some of the other East Bay resources that we have that I'm sure would be a great collaboration and a great resource, and would direct the public to our website to learn about histories as well. So and then of course direct them to other places where there's those resources that exist in the East Bay. So aside from that, these are some of the other initiatives, very interconnected with looking at how we're going to provide access this year. Of course, we're going to be in the oral history program. We're planning on increasing the number of interviews this year. I met with the Bancroft Library last week to talk about our contract. We also want to do more video interviews, and I'm still trying to evaluate if we should have like tiers of interviews. Some may be just volunteer level interviews, and some may be at this level where, whoa, it'd be great to have a video of this. And then some are at the level of having a Bancroft interview. Records management, this might be a presentation, these two might be presentations later this year or mentioned later this year. And one is definitely where are we going to store everything and how, and that is definitely something that we are working on. In cultural resources, a lot of movement with Thurgood Marshall and the Concord Naval Weapons Station archives. We've been working with the Navy. I've had meetings with planning and INR about what are we going to do with all the stuff there? And then how are we going to collect all of that and have a central resource for those archives? This is something that Cultural Services Coordinator Anna Marie Guerrero and I, and also other folks in planning, we would love to at some point develop a training for employees, mainly field staff. It'd be really helpful for them to know who does what, and maybe some really simple procedures for what to do with things that they have there in their offices. And as far as the history program, I met with UC Berkeley last week to start the spring semester of projects, and definitely continuing partnering and supporting INR for histories and stories. And then I believe I'm on the agenda next week for presenting about Olmsted 200. So I will just say it that way. But I just want to mention that a lot of this is supported by contract work here right now. As you know, I'm a staff of one. There's an archives program supervisor, and then I do have a group of contractors that I work with over the year, and I'm really happy to have a separate budget to track that. I'm really appreciative of that. And then here's this. And so I recognize that I'm a staff of one, but I also recognize that to support the district-wide collaboration, I think is so important. And we have this opportunity. And about a year ago, there was work being done on trying to get this started, which was an archives and cultural resources staff advisory group. And this was also something that was a recommendation from the needs assessment for the archives. And we had our first meeting last week, so I'm very excited. But I also want to make sure that the Natural Cultural Resources Committee, the board directors in the committee, that their input and their guidance and their that's part of the movement here at the Archives and History Center as well. And that's it. That's my presentation. I forgot to start my timer, so I hope I'm still on time. And I welcome any questions and input, especially about anything about the access or so. Me and my screen. I'm going to stop share.
Thank you, Brenda. Any additional from management? If not, can we move to, no, she's, Christina's shaking her head, no. So Director Lane is not muted. So maybe Bev, if you want to comment or question.
Yes, I always find all of this really fascinating, as Brenda knows, and I think it's truly remarkable that a staff of one is covering so many different aspects and helping to coordinate this Wednesday group of volunteers that is so talented. So I do have a couple of questions. One is, I know that at Black Diamond, they initially put everything onto Past Perfect. So that information from Past Perfect been successfully transferred into the new, is it Perfidio?
Yes. Yes, Director Lane. That is completed. However, there's just some bugs and things like that have transferred over that they're trying to clarify. And sometimes it could be just that some of the records that had been entered years ago, sometimes some stuff moves around in the archives, or that record's gone missing. Maybe it's in the database, but the actual item itself may have moved somewhere else. So Thomas and Crystal have been working a lot on that, of trying to clean up the records and to verify them. And the last is incorporating the images. So we're just waiting to see how the images come over. It's complicated. I was nervous about trying to explain it, so I'm glad I just brushed over how it happens. But it's definitely a tedious process of going through quite a number of records.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I can only imagine. What about the actual items that are being stored at Black Diamond? In the
Trailer?
Portable buildings, are they still there, or is there a plan to move them someplace?
They are still there. We had been discussing moving them, but I think that there's like this hesitancy to talk about it until there is a determination of where the Trudeau archives are going to be, and how that may support what we do with the trailer.
Sure. Okay. I can certainly see that. So right now, if somebody wants access to, for instance, to learn more about, let's say, a park like Lake Chabot, where would they go to get that historical information if they wanted to come to our archives?
Yeah, right now that's where, we're hoping that the website might be a little bit more helpful. Because right now it's a phone call to me or an email, and for me to either know that I have some of that digitized already that I could send to them, or they can come here and I would pull the files, and they could go through what we have here. And I also sometimes.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I also sometimes delegate to the volunteers if it's something that they also are expertise in.
So, but what someone can do who wants to know just like the first information about it is almost all of our brochures have a history, right?
That is correct. I thank you for mentioning that, because that is something that I know Public Affairs was very interested in, making sure that history was mentioned about each park. So it should be on the brochures. And if they go to the website, if they look at the parks, there should be a history section. But it's usually just a paragraph.
Okay, so yeah, so they can at least get that basic work. And I know naturalists and public affairs have worked for years to have that core information. So that's where people would go. They go to the park and then they go to the history on the website, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So at least that's, for a lot of people, that's all they are interested in. So, okay. Well, thank you so much. I'm sure I have more things, and I certainly appreciate the work that you've been doing on it, and the work that Tracy did kind of by herself out there at Black Diamond, for many, many years. I think I'll have one other question, but why don't you go to the other committee members first?
Director Corbett?
Don't really have any questions, but I'm just very impressed by the fact that you're able to, there's so many different bits of information and items to save and protect. So we have this history of our park district, but just watching what you have done is really, really, really impressive. It's a lot of hard work, and thank you so much for caring about it so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I appreciate just the existence of your position, Brenda, that you've come into, because this was a facet of what the Park District has done historically, so to speak, that drew me, you spoke of your own enthusiasm for what the Park District is. This drove me even closer to the district in those days when I was serving on the PAC and the ambassador program, is the constant relevance of local history, cultural and historical heritages with what the Park District did. And it encompasses a significant part of our master plan of 2013 for a park and trail agency. Our master plan speaks a lot to the focus on these histories and many layers of history and culture that overlay our parklands. And it was, I think, a manifestation of that effort in the master plan in 2013 that eventually brought about the creation of your position and what resources we do now devote to it. And just to plant in your mind, when master planning comes up again, it's something in all your free time you're going to be able to give yourself some ability to think about, is what we have in terms of archiving artifacts, what might be described as museum pieces. There's an awful lot there. It strikes me as similar to that acquisition spree after 2008, where we acquired in eastern ends of our districts, especially in Contra Costa, many thousands of acres of land that we had no ability to actually become operational within that 10-year period. And we're now coming around to addressing that need. But the impetus is preserve land, save land. And you folks are doing the same thing. You're identifying history in terms of artifacts and documentation, and you're preserving them, and they're going all into these records, and now it's being computerized. But my God, we have all sorts of museums that are waiting to happen, and they're actually you're working on them, right? Thurgood Marshall, the Black Diamond could have a substantial museum aspect to its visitor centers that's far beyond what it does now in the 2 visitor centers at Black Diamond, Round Valley, and you're proactive about it. I remember, was it Anne or Bevertees, when they heard the Arata farm family had an estate sale. We went out to acquire items that would go with the future of a ranch that we were now shepherding. We don't even just wait for things to come to us. We go out and get things. And so I just wonder what thought, that's a long preamble to the question of what resources or time in terms of sheer thought that you're able to bring to, other than getting these in along with documents archived in a database. How do we deal with the potential at the various parts of displaying these museum pieces and these histories? And I'm sure you're working on that as we speak with Thurgood Marshall, which is going to be a substantial museum, I think, as opposed to just a visitor or nature center, right? So I'll throw that at you. Sorry.
Well, yes, actually, in the needs assessment, that is the ultimate goal or pathway that they try to do in the report, which is, getting us to a museum and what does that look like, and what are all the things that we need to do. I do want to mention really quick, I did meet with our general manager, Sabrina Landreth, on the archives, and that is something to even, I know it kind of funnels towards me, but what I want to do is push it back out into having some policies and procedures and guidelines so that going forth, and that's what the advisory group and the Natural Cultural Resources Committee can help us do, which is, make it sustainable for the future generation so that they have a process in place, and that all leads to having a center, having a museum, having a destination for people to learn about history. I don't know if that answers it, but it definitely inspired me to say that.
I just hope we continue to have time and at least some resources to think about how we not only gather these artifacts and documents, but we also are able ultimately to display them.
Yes.
In one form or the other than just something we can go look up on the web. To me, that's exciting and a major attraction, and it should be in the back of our mind as we pursue expansion of what you do and the outcome of what you're doing.
Right. In person, it's an in-person experience. It's an impact on you in every sense. And I know that sometimes the web could be one-dimensional, and it only goes so far, but it doesn't give you that sense that you're in a period of time, and this object is taking you there. So yeah.
Okay. Anything else from members of the board? Director Lane is back with us in person, virtually.
Yeah, all these lights went on, and I'm still hearing in here, and I don't know how to turn that off, but as long as you can't hear it, that's fine. Yes, so I do have a couple of things. One is I'm not sure, Colin, that you and Ellen had a chance to look at or read through the needs assessment with regard to archives. That's not the correct name, but it was done a couple of years ago. I came to us just as COVID collapsed on us, I believe. And I found that was very interesting. It was like, went over what was needed and in order for us to take care of our history in different levels. And, but it was pretty much unconstrained in what it suggested. And one of its suggestions was to take over the Oakland Auditorium, that's next to the Oakland Museum. and that would be appropriate for the Park District to do for the museum and for archives.
Well, that's right. Oh, good. I'm glad you raised that. That triggers that memory.
Yeah, so anyway, I'm sure if you want to take a look at that again now,
Yeah.
we're talking about it. I think all of those things that they suggested and pointed out are really helpful for us to look at, and I need to do that again myself. Then I did want to make sure Anne Marie and Brenda recall that Bev Ortiz set up a training for field staff as to when they found archives or mysterious items. And so I'm sure that's in the system, and it's something that certainly some of the supervisors have had that training, but always having reminders and building on that training, I think, is really important. I talked to Tracy Parent over the years, and I mean, there is so many things out at Black Diamond that there was well, you should leave that in place, but how do you know that you're supposed to leave that in place? So there's difficult decisions that surround some of these items that you find. And then I was wondering, because one of the things that the naturalists have been doing for maybe 3 years is working on stories that reflect the diversity of people in the East Bay. And I think they have really enjoyed that. And I really appreciate it, because so often the naturalists do more natural resources and fewer cultural resources. And so how do people access those stories and programs that the naturalists have done that feature our diverse populations?
Would you like someone from the naturalists? I don't think there's anybody here.
Yes.
Anne was
Brenda, I
here
think-
earlier. I don't see Anne right now. No.
Because all those, I mean, at least the virtual programs are there online that people can see. But as far as, do you mean just other programming? Or
I'm not sure that some of these that are the stories that I'm talking about are have that category of virtual programs, which they did during COVID. So I'm just kind of wondering where they are and how people can access them, because they had some very interesting stories about Chinese at Black Diamond and a wide variety of others.
right. I think that's kind of like where the website could help with that, which is pointing people to those stories. I don't think that I'm not quite sure if we're organized to that, but that's definitely something that is a great topic for the staff advisory group to talk about how, where the stories are going to go and how are we going to make sure that people are seeing them and know that is our work. And it's definitely something I can bring up with it in that group. So I would love to do that and bring that up.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. So, and I love the idea of our having a museum. I think at the very least, we're talking about the lobby of the new Peralta Oaks North being set up so that it is possible to do various stories about Park District in that setting. So when that happens, you need to really get professional exhibit people in to know how you can set it up so that you can get in and out of cases, because I've seen some nightmares where they say, oh, it's cool, we'll just do these glass doors with panels in them. Well, like our current Veterans Hall, actually, in Danville, did that. And they didn't talk to anybody about exhibits. They just thought they knew what they were doing, which they didn't. And it really interferes in seeing the artifacts. And with that, I'm going to say it's so good to be back with all of you.
Anything else before we move on to work plan? No, any public comment?
There were no public comments received.
All right, then just before we move on to work plan, I just want to give Brenda a heads up. For our next board meeting, would you be able to dig out any background information we have, if any, on that home site within, I want to say Vargas. I'm not exactly sure whether it's Vargas or Guerrero. No, I know I've seen it and visited it, but we have a historic home site, I think it's Vargas, that is referred to as Ukrainia and was the homestead of a Ukrainian immigrant to the United States who proceeded from the East Bay Hills to make he and his wife's home, and furthered in the late 19th century, in the late 1800s, a facet of Ukrainian resistance to Tsarist Russia. I don't know. It's, there's some connection to today, I feel, out of that, and that historic connection that the East Bay Parks has to that site up in the East Bay Hills. And
Yeah, it's in Guerin. It's in Guerin.
You remember it, Beth? It's Guerin.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's a Ukrainian bishop or something. Can't remember the exact word, but it's Guerin, and they have a beautiful view of the bay from the location and interpretive information. There's quite a bit, and yeah, Ukraine is in the news, isn't it?
Yeah, and as someone whose grandfather emigrated from Ukraine around the turn of the century, I feel like maybe that's a great connection that this district has with Ukraine and the Ukrainian people. So maybe just worth a couple of minutes, Brenda. Just heads up.
Sure.
Could we go on, Christina, to our last agenda item, which is a review that you have with our board packet of the rest of the year's work plan for the committee.
Yes, thank you, Director Coffey. I will put the agenda up on the proposed work plan up on the screen. Hopefully this will work. Can you all see that okay?
A little larger would be good. Oh. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So this is the same as what you have in your agenda packet there. But let me preface this by saying Director Corbett was mentioning that how much she's enjoying being on this committee. And I would say that Director Corbett, you're joining this committee at a good time and an exciting time, that we are really looking at rounding out the committee to be fully about cultural resources and historic resources in addition to the natural resources. I think in the past, this committee had been pretty focused on the natural resources piece, and really appreciate the board members continuing to ask for more on the cultural and historic side. So we are, that's part of the goal this year, is to really be sure that at every committee meeting, we have robust items on all of those issues. So this is really just a time for the board to provide any comments or thoughts on this draft work plan. We did pull together interpretive, the INR side, interpretive and naturalist with Ann Kassabaum, and then with Brenda and Carol Johnson on the historic resources side, and then with the Anna Marie, of course, on the cultural side, and stewardship as well. And so all of those teams contributed to this work plan. And I do just want to take a minute and really thank Brenda. She's been tremendous, wonderful to work with, and she's doing a lot to try to pull all the different divisions together to really work on the archives piece. So thank you, Brenda, for that presentation, for your efforts there. So today, February 23rd, we had a good topic from kind of each of the three, cultural and historic and stewardship. And then we have a few topics that we have already committed to, such as the IPM Annual update, which we'll be looking at bringing in April. And then an update on the blue-green algae and what we're doing efforts to address blue-green algae. And then Anna Marie Guerrero will be bringing an overview of historic properties in the Park District. And then we'll be bringing an annual report and update after we've had our free roaming cat management policy, the revised policy in place for a year. We'll bring an update on that. And then we have an item, and I'm in June here, from the research permits program. It's some student research that is happening in our parks that Anna Marie will be able to help us learn about. And then the ecological health assessment, we're still looking for a better, catchier name for this, but this is work that we're doing to get some baseline data to look at the current health of our ecological systems in the East Bay. And we're doing that in partnership with other major public landowners to get some baseline data and then update that every few years to better understand the impacts of climate change and development. And then this one is exciting, a virtual tour of the archives. And Brenda will be able to share some video and take us on an existing tour of places that we're storing archives and doing work with archives throughout the Park District. Then we have our stewardship seminar in September as well, not on September 7th. That's a little misleading here. It'll be on a different date in the fall. And then in December, post-fire monitoring of the catastrophic wildfires from 2020. And then an overview of the curriculum that we do with Ohlone. And that will be coming from interpretation through Ann Cassabaum's group. And then we hope in December to give an overflow of how this advisory group, the staff group, has been working and how we've had a reorganization over the last couple of years, as the board members are aware of the archives. Brenda's position is new, and then Anna Marie's position, the cultural resources coordinator, has moved into planning. And so we're doing a lot of work to figure out how those departments work together and to be sure that we're really coordinated tightly. So if the board is interested, we'd bring you an update on that toward the end of the year. So that is the work plan. I'll go ahead and stop sharing, and I'm happy to put it back up if the board would like to see it again, but I'm happy to take any comments or suggestions from the board.
Thank you, Christina.
The one thing that comes to mind is that, if we could shift this so that we had a meeting every other month, we might be able to back up our December one to November. So you could do June, August, stewardship seminar, and then November for our natural and cultural resources. I was just looking at the spacing between them.
Well, I just want to clarify that stewardship seminar is listed in September. That's not accurate. We typically do that in early November. And the reason doing it early November is why we often skip the meetings, is because that's, we've always done it the first week of November or second week, depending on the holiday where Veterans Day falls. So, and I think stewardship would be planning to do that again in November. It's a good time for us as we end the field season and all the construction has to end October 31st. So we've got a lot of biomonitoring, other things happening. And so it's kind of where it starts to slow down for our field season in the end of the winter. And so that's why we typically target November for the steward seminar.
But Director Lane, we can look at that and see if there's other ways. I think you're looking at shifting that December meeting into November is what you were trying to work out. So let me take that back and work with Yolanda and work with Matt Grau and come back with a proposal.
Okay, well, and I can see we do try to give ourselves some space in August to get away. So we wouldn't want to put the committee in the middle of our space. And I can see how you've done like the the annual reports that we asked for, the IPM on one and the free roaming cats on another. And I think it's important for us to allow enough time on those.
Director Corbett.
I agree with Director Lane on perhaps moving the meeting off of December, because as we know, there's always so many other special events that we're involved in December. So I think it would make sense to move that meeting up too.
Yeah, I saw today's agenda and the work plan as achieving that mix that I think Director Lane and I have been talking about for a while, and that is a balance of nature topics and cultural topics and history topics. I think you're doing that. This is a great program for the year, as I could describe it. I was really happy to see it. The item that comes to my mind that we've spoken about, or I've spoken about in the past, is it would be interesting to have a presentation that presents the big picture of the relationship the Park District has had historically and continues to have every day with our colleges and universities in the Bay Area. We seemingly in topics presented to this committee, we're always landing on connections to UC Berkeley. I think I've said in the past that probably could be a decent dissertation done on the history of UC Berkeley's impact on this Park District. But beyond Berkeley, Cal State East Bay and Merritt College and on. Through internships, research students that are researching the actual academic studies that use our parks from the universities, UC Davis that we're doing stuff with. It's really robust, that connection with the colleges, the students and the faculties of academia out there. And it's always really impressed me. And I think if at some point someone could do a presentation with, you know, a kind of a snapshot, or maybe not a snapshot, but a historic view of all these academic activities that we have going in partnership with the colleges in the area, that would be really, really interesting to me. I don't know. Others think that's important, but it seems to me like an important facet of what we do.
Yeah, well, I think that's interesting. If you weren't going to do like a historical report on it and just talk about what we're doing now and maybe the year before COVID, you know, there's also the class that Jim O'Connor is promoting on training to be to work in the environmental and parks field. Yeah, but it might better go to the executive committee, depending on the how it was presented.
Ellen?
Presenting the various different internship type programs we have here, I think we could do a lot more in providing that information to all of the community colleges that are surrounding our parks. You know, obviously we do that in some, but not all, and we could do so much more. And that would also help us, you know, increase our population of internships and make sure that we're bringing young people from all different backgrounds and communities. That would be very supportive of our goal to do that.
Indeed, it's very true. So that's the only thought I had, Christina.
Excuse me.
Okay, well, thank you. Those are great suggestions, and I'll work with staff and see what we might come up with to address those. Any other comments from the board?
Well, yeah, I'm not sure where that would fit, but I'm very interested in it's at some point being brought up to date on McCosker, and you know the fact that Lisa mentioned the rain slowed it down, and it's just, you know, it's such a huge project for us, and I'm not sure whether it belongs here or whether we should get a special presentation at the board on it, because it is a pretty extraordinary project that everybody's talking about in the field, I'm sure.
Yes, thank you, Director Lane. We do expect to bring that to the board with an update, probably in April. It will come to the full board to talk about the impacts of the storms and red flag days and COVID, and give a status update overall on that project. It is an exciting project, frustrating to have delays, but still a very exciting project. And there'll be a lot of good pictures to share and updates to give. So we'll come back in in April, April.
Okay, good.
All right, thank you very much. We'll move on to public comments. So I'll ask our clerk whether there are any public comments on items not on the agenda this afternoon.
We did not receive any public comments today.
All right, I don't see anyone around raising their hand. So before adjourning, one more opportunity for general board comments. Members? We're done?
Very happy to be on this committee.
Yeah.
Have you?
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome. And so we can close. Any final thoughts, Christina?
Just to thank the board members. It's wonderful to have board members that are so engaged on these issues. And Director Corbett, it's very nice to have you. Welcome to the committee. And it's going to be an exciting year. This is a great committee with lots of interesting topics. So thank you, board members.
And thank you to Tamara and Sabrina for getting the logistics of all this together and helping us run a smooth meeting. That's very helpful. And to all the staff who presented, again, really good work. And we are very appreciative. So with that, we'll adjourn and see y'all at the board meeting, I guess, coming up. Thank you.
Thank you.